Chronic irritability and resentment are often silent burdens that weigh heavily on our emotional and mental well being. Unlike fleeting moments of frustration, chronic irritability is a persistent state of agitation that seeps into your daily life, impacting relationships, productivity, and your sense of self. Resentment, on the other hand, is a simmering anger that builds over time, often directed at others for perceived wrongs or at yourself for feeling trapped. When left unaddressed, these emotions can turn into a toxic cycle, leaving you feeling constantly on edge and bitter. One of the most challenging aspects of chronic irritability is its insidious nature. It doesn't appear overnight. Instead, it accumulates from a series of small, seemingly inconsequential moments where your needs are overlooked, your boundaries are crossed, or your efforts go unappreciated. You might start snapping at loved ones for minor issues or feel inexplicably annoyed at situations that wouldn't usually bother you. This is because irritability is often a signal that something deeper is wrong, perhaps unmet needs, burnout, or a feeling of being undervalued. Resentment often walks hand in hand with chronic irritability. When you constantly put others' needs before your own or consistently compromise your boundaries, resentment takes root. It's that feeling you get when you've gone out of your way to support someone, only to realize that your efforts are not reciprocated or even acknowledged. It's a harsh inner dialogue that says, "Why am I always the one who sacrifices?" The physical and emotional toll of chronic irritability and resentment can be immense. You might notice tension in your shoulders, headaches, or even gastrointestinal issues as stress manifests in your body. Mentally, it can feel like you're constantly on guard, ready to react defensively even when there's no real threat. This heightened state of alertness drains your energy and leaves you exhausted, making it even harder to focus on positive aspects of your life. One major trigger of chronic irritability is feeling out of control. When life becomes overwhelmingly busy and you have a little say in how your time and energy are spent, irritability can become your brain's way of expressing discomfort. You might feel irritated because your autonomy is compromised, and that sense of powerlessness breeds resentment. At the root of this reaction is often a lack of clear boundaries and the tendency to say yes when you really mean no. Social expectations and personal guilt can also play significant roles. Many people, especially those who naturally gravitate towards caregiving or people pleasing, feel a deep sense of guilt when they consider prioritizing their own needs. As a result, they stretch themselves thin, continuously giving without replenishment. This internal conflict, wanting to be helpful but feeling unappreciated, creates a breeding ground for chronic irritability. Breaking free from this cycle requires intentional self-reflection. First, it's crucial to recognize that feeling irritable and resentful doesn't make you a bad person. These emotions are signals that your inner needs are not being met. Take a moment to identify the specific situations or relationships that trigger these feelings. Is it a demanding job, a one-sided friendship, or family obligations that feel overwhelming? Pinpointing the root cause is the first step towards reclaiming your emotional well-being. Once you have identified the triggers, set boundaries to protect your mental health. This could mean learning to say no more often, delegating tasks, or having open conversations about how you feel. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but asserting your needs is not selfish. It's necessary. It's necessary. Communicate openly with those around you, explaining that you need to make some changes to feel more balanced and less overwhelmed. By taking proactive steps, you're not just managing irritability, you're prioritizing your well-being. In the end, it's about reclaiming your sense of control. Chronic irritability and resentment don't have to dictate your interactions and quality of life. You deserve to live without carrying the constant weight of unspoken frustrations. By acknowledging these feelings and addressing them head on, you give yourself the permission to prioritize yourself. Remember, focusing on your well-being isn't just a choice. It's a commitment to living a more peaceful and fulfilling life. Seeking validation through overgiving is a pattern that many people fall into without even realizing it. It begins innocently enough. Maybe you offer to help a friend with a project, stay late at work to support your team, or volunteer for a family obligation even though you're exhausted. On the surface, these actions seem generous and kind. But beneath that surface often lies a deeper, unspoken motivation: the need for approval, acceptance, or recognition. You give not just because you want to, but because you hope it will earn you a sense of worth or affection from others. And that's where the trap begins. At the heart of overgiving is an internal belief that your value is directly tied to how much you do for others. You become the person who is always available, always willing to help, always ready to sacrifice your own needs for the sake of someone else. But instead of feeling appreciated, you start to feel drained. Instead of feeling loved, you feel used. Why? Because when your actions are driven by a desire for validation, they are never truly satisfying. You're constantly chasing the next opportunity to prove your worth, hoping that this time someone will finally see how much you do and acknowledge it. The cycle of overgiving is emotionally exhausting because it creates a constant imbalance in your relationships. You may find yourself being the one who always listens but rarely feels heard, the one who always shows up but doesn't receive the same effort in return. Over time, this leads to resentment, not just towards others for not reciprocating, but towards yourself for needing their approval in the first place. It's a silent form of self-betrayal, where you continuously ignore your own needs in the hope of earning love or respect. One of the most damaging aspects of seeking validation through overgiving is how it distorts your sense of self. Instead of recognizing your inherent worth as a person, you start to believe that you are only as good as your last favor, your last sacrifice, or your last act of service, Your self-esteem becomes conditional, fluctuating based on how much you do for others and how they respond. If someone doesn't seem grateful, you question yourself. If someone doesn't return the favor, you feel unworthy. This is a fragile foundation for self-worth, one that is easily shattered. The problem is compounded by the fact that overgiving can become a habit, one that is difficult to break. You may have spent years training yourself to believe that being helpful is the key to being loved. Perhaps it started in childhood, where praise and affection were given only when you were being good or making others happy. Or maybe it developed in adulthood, in a toxic relationship where you were made to feel that love had to be earned. Regardless of its origin, this habit of overgiving becomes your default mode, making it hard to see a way out. But here's the painful truth: overgiving rarely leads to the validation you're seeking. In fact, it often has the opposite effect. When you constantly give without setting boundaries, others may start to take you for granted. They may assume that you will always be there, always willing to help, and they may even begin to expect your sacrifices without appreciating them. And this can leave you feeling invisible and unimportant, the very feelings you were trying to avoid by overgiving in the first place. Breaking free from this pattern requires a radical shift in mindset. It begins with understanding that your value is not determined by how much you do for others. You are worthy simply because you exist, because of who you are, not because of what you can provide. This means learning to give from a place of genuine care, not out of a need for approval. It means recognizing that setting boundaries is an act of self-love, not selfishness. And most importantly, it means allowing yourself to receive, to let others show up for you without feeling guilty. Rebuilding your self-worth from the inside out is a process. It means practicing self-compassion, acknowledging that you have needs too, and recognizing that it's okay to prioritize them. It means surrounding yourself with people who appreciate you for who you are, not just for what you can do for them. Most importantly, it means learning to validate yourself, to acknowledge your own strengths, celebrate your own accomplishments, and remind yourself that you are enough, just as you are. Because the truth is, genuine love and respect are never earned through overgiving. They are shared freely between people who see each other as equals. Neglecting personal needs is one of the most common yet damaging habits people develop, often without even realizing it. It starts with good intentions. You want to be helpful, supportive, and reliable. You put the needs of your family, friends, or colleagues ahead of your own, believing that this makes you a better person. But over time, this self-sacrifice becomes a silent thief, quietly stealing your energy, your happiness, and your sense of self. You become so focused on what others need that you forget to ask yourself, what do I need? One of the biggest dangers of neglecting personal needs is that it can lead to burnout. Your body and mind are like a battery. They need to be recharged regularly. But when you constantly prioritize others and ignore your own well being, that battery drains faster than it can recharge. You may start to feel tired all the time, even after a full night's sleep. Your patience may wear thin, and small inconveniences might trigger overwhelming frustration. This is because your emotional and physical resources are depleted, leaving you in a constant state of exhaustion. Neglecting personal needs also has a profound impact on your mental health. When you continually ignore your desires, interests, and even basic necessities like rest or relaxation, it can lead to feelings of resentment. This resentment is often directed at the people you are helping because it feels like they are the reason you are so drained. But more often than not, the true source of resentment is yourself for allowing your own well being to be compromised. It's an uncomfortable truth that we don't often acknowledge. Every time you ignore your needs, you send a message to yourself that you don't matter. Another consequence of neglecting personal needs is the loss of self identity. When you spend all your time catering to the expectations and demands of others, you can lose sight of who you are. You become so busy being a caregiver, a problem solver, or a peacekeeper that you forget your own passions, hobbies, and dreams. Your life becomes a series of tasks and obligations rather than a journey of self discovery and fulfillment. It's as if you are living someone else's life, not your own. Physically, neglecting personal needs can manifest in a range of health issues. Stress, poor sleep, and a lack of self care can weaken your immune system, making you more susceptible to illnesses. You may develop unhealthy eating habits, skip exercise, or rely on caffeine and sugar to keep you going. Over time, this can lead to serious health problems like chronic fatigue, anxiety, high blood pressure, or even depression. Your body tries to send you warning signals, headaches, muscle tension, and frequent illnesses. But when you are too busy caring for others, you often ignore them. Socially, neglecting personal needs can damage your relationships. Ironically, the very people you are trying to support can become frustrated or overwhelmed by your constant availability. They may feel guilty for relying on you, or they may begin to take you for granted, assuming that you will always be there. And because you are so focused on their needs, you may miss the signs that they want you to take care of yourself. In some cases, this can even lead to codependent relationships where your sense of self-worth is tied entirely to your ability to meet the needs of others. But why do people neglect their personal needs in the first place? For many, it comes down to beliefs formed in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where you were praised for being good when you helped others, you may have learned to associate self-worth with self-sacrifice, a sacrifice. Cultural expectations also play a role, especially for those who are taught that putting themselves first is selfish. Over time, these beliefs become internalized, making it difficult to even recognize that your needs are being neglected. The first step to breaking free from this cycle is awareness. You must begin to recognize the signs that you are neglecting yourself. Constant fatigue, irritability, loss of interest in things you once loved, or feeling disconnected from your own life. Once you are aware of the problem, you can start making changes. This means setting boundaries. Even if it feels uncomfortable at first, it means giving yourself permission to rest, to say no without guilt, and to prioritize activities that bring you joy. Most importantly, it means remembering that taking care of yourself is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Because when you neglect your own needs, you are not just sacrificing your well-being. You are sacrificing your ability to live a life that is truly your own. Difficulty setting boundaries is a silent struggle that many people face but rarely talk about. It's not just about saying no. It's about knowing where your limits lie and having the courage to enforce them, even when it feels uncomfortable. For some, the problem begins with a desire to be liked. You fear that if you set boundaries, you will disappoint others, upset them, or be seen as selfish, so you say yes to requests that stretch you too thin. You accommodate others even when it inconveniences you, and you allow behaviors that make you uncomfortable. Over time, this constant self-sacrifice creates an emotional burden, leaving you feeling overwhelmed, unappreciated, and ironically, disconnected from the very people you're trying to please.
One of the biggest misconceptions about boundaries is that they are a form of rejection or cruelty.
This belief can make setting boundaries feel like a betrayal of those you care about. But the truth is, boundaries are an act of self-respect. They are a way of clearly communicating what is acceptable and what is not, both to yourself and to others. When you have difficulty setting boundaries, you end up living in a state of constant compromise. You might find yourself taking on extra work that isn't your responsibility, tolerating disrespectful behavior, or feeling pressured to maintain relationships that drain you. This not only damages your self-esteem, but also breeds resentment, as you begin to feel like others are taking advantage of you, even though, in reality, you have given them that permission by failing to set limits. A major reason why people struggle with boundaries is the fear of conflict. You worry that saying no or asserting your limits will lead to arguments, rejection, or anger from others. This fear can be so powerful that you convince yourself it's better to keep the peace by staying silent and compliant. But in avoiding conflict with others, you create conflict within yourself. Each time you allow your boundaries to be crossed, you send a message to yourself that your feelings don't matter as much as someone else's. Over time, this internal conflict can manifest as anxiety, low self-worth, and even depression because you have trained yourself to prioritize everyone else over your own well-being. The impact of difficulty setting boundaries extends far beyond your emotional health. It affects your relationships in profound ways. When you constantly give without limits, others may become accustomed to your generosity and start to expect it. They may not even realize that you are struggling because you never communicate your true feelings. In some cases, they may unintentionally take advantage of your kindness, while in others, they may lose respect for you because you never assert yourself. You might even attract people who intentionally exploit your inability to set boundaries, leading to toxic or codependent relationships. Ironically, the more you try to maintain harmony by avoiding boundaries, the more your relationships suffer because they are built on a foundation of hidden resentment and unmet needs. Overcoming the difficulty of setting boundaries begins with a fundamental mindset shift, understanding that boundaries are not walls that keep people out, but bridges that allow you to connect with others in a healthy, authentic way. It starts with recognizing that your needs, feelings, and preferences are just as valid as anyone else's. From there, you must learn to communicate your boundaries clearly and confidently. This may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you have spent years as a people pleaser, but it is a skill that can be developed with practice. Start small. Say no to a minor request. Express your honest opinion without apologizing, or take time for yourself without feeling guilty. As you become more comfortable asserting your boundaries, you will notice a profound transformation. You will feel more empowered, more respected, and more at peace because you are finally living in alignment with your true self. Feeling disconnected from your goals is a painful and often confusing experience. It's that unsettling sense of wandering through life without a clear direction, even though you once had dreams, ambitions, and a vision for your future. At some point, the fire that once burned brightly within you begins to fade. The goals you were so passionate about become distant memories, buried under the weight of daily responsibilities, external expectations, and the constant noise of life. You start to question your choices, wondering if you ever truly knew what you wanted in the first place. This disconnection doesn't just rob you of motivation, it leaves you feeling empty, as if you're simply going through the motions without any real sense of purpose. One of the most common causes of feeling disconnected from your goals is the relentless pursuit of external validation. In a world that constantly measures success by societal standards, a prestigious job, a fancy car, social media fame, it's easy to lose sight of what genuinely matters to you. You may have started with a goal that was deeply personal, something that excited and inspired you. But over time, as you sought approval from others, your focus shifted. And with each step you took towards these external milestones, you drifted further away from your authentic self. Until one day you woke up and realized you no longer recognized the path you were on. Another major factor that leads to feeling disconnected from your goals is the trap of routine. Life can become a series of repetitive tasks and obligations. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, and repeat. This monotony can dull your sense of ambition and creativity, making it difficult to stay connected to your dreams. When you are stuck in an endless cycle of responsibilities, it becomes almost impossible to find the time, energy, or inspiration to pursue your goals. You tell yourself that you'll get back to them someday, but that day never comes. As the months turn into years, your goals become distant memories, and the idea of pursuing them feels like a fantasy. Fear is another silent but powerful force that creates a disconnect between you and your goals. Even if you know what you want, the fear of failure, rejection, or judgment can be paralyzing. You may find yourself making excuses, telling yourself that you're too busy, too old, too inexperienced, or not talented enough. These excuses become a protective shield, keeping you safe from disappointment, but also keeping you trapped. But the reality is that fear doesn't disappear just because you avoid it. Instead, it quietly grows, turning your dreams into regrets. You become disconnected from your goals, not because they are impossible, but because you've convinced yourself that pursuing them is too risky. Reconnecting with your goals requires a conscious and courageous effort. It begins with self-reflection, asking yourself, what did I once dream of doing? What makes me feel alive? It means stripping away the noise of other people's expectations and rediscovering your own desires. It also means acknowledging the fears and excuses that have been holding you back and deciding that they will no longer control you. Rebuilding your connection to your goals might involve setting aside time for self-care, exploring new interests, or surrounding yourself with people who inspire and support you. Most importantly, it means taking small, consistent steps towards your dreams, even when they feel distant. Because the truth is, your goals never truly left you. They were simply waiting for you to remember them.